right, well, we're going to get started. It's a couple minutes after 2 o'clock. I want to thank everyone for coming to, our cybersecurity mitigating risk for micro businesses and the technical assistance program. How to give technical assistance to your micro businesses and what to look out for. This is part of our third Thursday webinar. We do this most of the time, the third Thursday of every month. This time, due to scheduling conflicts, we had to move it to the fourth Thursday. Today, we have a bunch of great experts for you. But before I introduce Jesse Torres, who's going to lead us through the webinar, I have given everybody the power to talk. You are all muted. If you scroll to the bottom left screen, there should be a little microphone. You can click on that microphone, and I think it's also might be, if you're on the top right of your, you could see the people who are on. You could unmute yourself. The top right, it shows up as a blue click button, or if you put your cursor to the bottom, there is a microphone, like I said, and you can click on that. I want everybody to introduce themselves. Let's see, I will type in the chat a couple of things. So your name, your org, and where you serve, and what you know about cybersecurity. It could be a lot, a little. You can. So we'll start with. And I should press enter. Let's start. I'll start from the bottom. What I see. Selena Burning.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Selena.
Hi, I'm with Southwest Initiative Foundation, actually in Minnesota. And cybersecurity, our organization actually has done quite a bit of training for us on it. We have monthly video type of training, but personally, that's about all I know about it. So okay. I don't know enough to teach it or to tell anyone about it. So
great. Well, hopefully we'll be able to give you some resources today. I don't think we can kind of train you exactly on how to become a cyber expert on a webinar, but we can at least point you in the right direction. Rich, you want to go next?
Sure. Rich Krause. I'm with the CDC, Small Business Finance, serving Southern California mostly. We're based in San Diego, and I am trying to learn as much as I can about cybersecurity to support our small business enterprises. And I don't have a lot of expertise, which is why I'm on this call, and just enough to know that our small businesses are really in jeopardy and in a lot of ways. I want to make sure I learn enough to pass it on to them to help protect themselves.
Great, thanks, Rich. Jane? I'll unmute you in case you can't find the button. I can't seem to unmute you. Oh, there you go. Jane? All right, let's move on to Marissa. Marissa? All right, let's move on to Jackie.
Hi, Heidi, can you hear me?
Can hear you, great.
Okay, great. As you know, I'm with the Southwest Initiative Foundation, and I'm just trying to learn as much as I can about cybersecurity for the work that we do and the small businesses that we work with.
Great, excellent. Jackie, if you have a question, that comes up next, you're going to have to speak a little louder into your microphone. But for now, that was fine.
Okay.
And Chris.
Hi, this is Chris with Biltmore Group, and I actually work with Jesse, and I'm interested in this topic. Thank you.
Fabulous. And I'm not sure if somebody else joined us or not. So I think there's a couple people just listening in on their phone. So great. I am going to mute you all. And without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Jesse Torres, who is a CAMEO board member. If you don't know Jesse, Jesse was a small business advocate for the state of California, super instrumental in helping us secure $23 million in investment from the state to the small business assistance programs. So there's no better advocate for small business than Jesse, board member. And he's also now with Biltmore Group, and Jesse's going to take it away. So Jesse, if you want to, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Heidi. It's great to be here with everyone. Let me just share my screen really quickly and get us going. Yeah, thank you again, Heidi. As she mentioned, my name is Jesse Torres. I'm partner and chief strategy officer for the Biltmore Group. We're an LA-based consulting firm. And I'm really excited to be facilitating today's webinar on cybersecurity, mitigating risk for microenterprises. As Heidi mentioned, I served previously as the state's principal small business advocate with Governor Brown's Office of Business and Economic Development, where I was actually able to co-lead a few different initiatives related to cybersecurity. And the one thing I'll say, just even at the beginning of this webinar, is that cybersecurity is a really big subject area to try to tackle, especially when it comes to addressing all the different concerns for the small business owner. So for today's webinar, what we're going to do the best we can in the time we have is to drill in on helping you better understand the current landscape of cyber risk, including providing some insights on the current threats and ways you can protect yourselves and the constituents you serve. We'll take a look at the current face of the technology that's out there, the cyber trends, and the kind of current landscape of convergence that Darren's going to talk a little bit about. And then we're going to end with just some information around research and resources that can help you and help your constituents as they kind of navigate the field of cyber risk. And hopefully today's conversation will be helpful to you. And definitely if you have questions along the way, please go ahead and put in the chat. But with that, let me jump into our panelists. So I'm really great to be here online with some really great group of experts who have volunteered their time to be with us and to share some of their information. I'll say that my introduction is going to be really brief given the time we have, but let me just say that we all have deep experience in either cybersecurity or economic development or some kind of combination of both, but I really won't be doing them much justice when it comes to their bios, so I want to keep it really brief. But with that, let me just start really in alphabetical order, starting with Darren Anderson, who is the founder of Cyber United, a cybersecurity, big data, and predictive analytics firm. He is also the chair of the Economic Committee for the Governor's Cybersecurity Task Force, and he does a lot of specialty work around the smart city space. Next, we have Bill Britton, who's the Vice President of Information Technology and Chief Information Officer at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo, where he's responsible for managing the university's information technology enterprise, while also building their cybersecurity center into a nationally prominent education and research facility. And then finally, we have Sid Barakara, who's principal for the San Diego-based consulting firm 10-Page Memo, which focuses on economic development and workforce strategies. And actually, Sid and I used to work together at the Governor's Office of Business Economic Development, and he helped co-lead our cybersecurity state initiatives, such things as our Cyber Health IT Advisory Board, our Defense Industry Cyber Initiative Cascade, and also our student-focused Cyber Innovation Challenge, which we did in partnership with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And I know he's going to talk a little bit about that as part of his remarks. But with that, let's turn it over to Bill to get us going. Here's a quick look at the agenda for the next 45 minutes or so, just to get a sense of it. But let me turn it over to Bill to kick us off and talk about current threats and also some of the strategies to mitigate threats. And Bill, just let me know when you want me to advance the slide.
Sure, that'd be great. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I got a yes from Jesse, but I'm looking for audience participation.
We're all muted. Everybody.
Oh, we're all muted. Okay,
Yeah,
type in your response now.
Yeah, we find that.
Don't worry, you don't have to type in anything. I've already hacked all your personal systems and it's no problem. So we'll just proceed from there. A couple of you really need to take your social security number off your machines. Not kidding. But let's take a look at what they're really going on here. These are statistics that should basically roll your socks down and make you feel very uncomfortable. We could certainly dive into them, but I think if you read this just for a real short period of time, you're going to see that there is some very, very similar problem sets. Number one, small businesses, micro businesses are major targets. That's not to say you by yourself are a target alone, because the big companies get their fair share as well. The problem or challenge is they're spending somewhere between millions and millions of dollars on the defense side of protecting their information. A lot more at risk in their area because of the size and magnitude. You know, we've seen hacks and breaches that run into the hundreds of millions of dollars, such as Target and others. But take a look here and see that 58% of the malware attacks victims are categorized as small businesses. This is software attacks. These are ransomware attacks. These are attacks on your system that really go to your point of sale, that go to your credit cards, that go to your, what I would call your crown jewels. The most important things about your company that if somebody else has, you lose your competitive advantage, or you lose data and you have somebody come visit you that wants to sue you. So those are really bad. Look at number 4. If you haven't circled it, please circle it, write it down. This is an interesting conversation. 92.4% of malware is delivered via email. The email is in the terms of phishing. Phishing attacks are where a non-accredited email is sent to you. In other words, you don't really know who it is. That email contains links, connections. It's looking for social engineering. Some of the emails that we've seen at the university are so well done. They have absolutely social engineered. They know everybody in an organizational structure. In that organizational structure, they'll say, Joe, your boss, told me to give you a contact and get some money sent to me because he couldn't get to it. So Joe will actually be referenced on it as an email item as well. What's interesting is they will put in an email that's not really Joe's, but it looks enough that you think, oh, look, Joe is getting this email as well. So the amount of time, energy, and the success ratio of the malware via email is extremely high. So there's a lot of companies that spend money on phishing training, phishing attack training. What's really interesting is the ratio on what you spend for phishing may be extremely high. The success only needs 1. So if they're sending you thousands of emails, only 1 needs to hit out of all those thousands. So your ratio for success is rarely low on that. We'll talk about what that means in just a minute. I think the other thing here is that what we see is that small businesses are absolutely becoming a target of opportunity. It's more in the category of small numbers. So if the hacker is looking at you, it's not just a you scenario. Realize they're not looking at 1, they're looking at many. So if they can find easy pathways into a company, it's not just you, it's hundreds just like you that they're going after. So again, what happens here is they look for the easiest attack vector. They look for the easiest way to get in, get information, and get out. And so the key becomes putting up barriers to entry. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to take a very plain, non-technical approach to understanding what to do and how to start thinking, not acting, but thinking about what to do. So I would say that there are 4 stages of what I would call cyber awareness. Now this cyber awareness also then equates to your cyber maturity in your workplace. And so if you really think about it, there's the first stage, and some of you actually use the same words. I'm not really aware. I'm not sure if I'm worried or not because I don't know if it really affects me. I don't know what to tell people. I'd like to learn more. So this is kind of the oblivious stage, which is where we know something's going on, but it's certainly not me because I haven't felt the effects yet. So that's kind of the, the preteen years in life where everything is cool and, life hasn't really hit you yet and, your homework isn't going bad yet and everything is just good until phase 2. The second stage, which is you've been had. And that's usually a personal revelation where you're all of a sudden you're going, holy crap, where'd this information come from? Or even better, it is a company like you or a partner or someone you know that's close to you or close to your company, or is a person that does business with your company who says, I don't know if I've infected you or not. These are phrases that when you get to that second phrase, it's like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. What do I do? And so what happens is you go through this panic phase, this phase where you start researching and looking and trying to figure out and talking to experts. And you might have enough dollars saved up to go talk to a professional who then comes in and says, let me do an assessment for you. So what happens now is you kind of start building up that paranoia, the fear factor is really taking over, and it leads to that next stage. I'd call it the Rambo stage. I hope all of you remember Rambo or anybody who is this, John Wick, Lara Croft. They take things in their own hands, and the next thing you know, you're spending money like crazy, not on your operation side, but on protecting yourself. You're buying malware, virus software, you're buying firewalls, you're buying all these things that you've been told, you read about. And listen, let me tell you, there are more ways to protect yourself than you have dollars to spend. So this is big business, and it's really about buying your way to feel protected. And this is a normal reaction. I mean, you feel like somebody broke into your house. What do? You buy more protection. You get ADT, you get cameras, you get all these things. So you overreact to react. Well, what's interesting then is you spend all that money, you start looking at your dollars in your portfolio, and the dollars on security and the dollars on concern are going up. You believe your risk has been reduced, but you can't really tell if it's having an impact on what you're doing. And what's interesting is you go through that whole process, your bottom line starts to drop, and you start to wonder, do I really need this? And you kind of start all over again. So the last phase is really this been there, done that. I spent all this money. I don't believe I had any problems. That the threat that my buddy told me about didn't really come through. So what do I do now? And it's really understanding. The fourth phase is what I would call the self-realization phase. And this is where you really want to move your company and other companies in the micro business too. The realization that you really kind of control your fate. And in controlling your fate, what you're responsible and should do is you really should sit down as a company, as an entity, and talk about what are the important things that if they were stolen, hacked, got out, leaked, that would expose you, that would create conflict for your company, conflict for you personally, and start then working backwards. Now, I would equate this to what we used to call being a good consumer. So in the world of consumer, you don't go walk around a street that you don't feel comfortable in, flash cash. Well, think about the internet, the computer, and doing business the same way. If somebody calls you at your house and you don't recognize their phone number, do you pick up the phone and answer it? Most of you will say, no, of course we don't, or it's a robocall and you just ignore it. Well, why don't we do the same thing when it comes to email? Well, the key is we're not practicing that consumerism when it comes to email. So the best ways to defeat all these things is for the people to coalesce, to think about how they want to do business, how they want to react with their customer set, and are certain pieces of information really important or not? Begin defining what's important to your company, yourself in that perspective, how to protect you and your family, and then approach your security on the internet from that perspective. Now that's kind of easy and simple, and I know it sounds like, Bill, that's just too simple. But really, before you spend any money, if you haven't done all those things, the people you pay to do it will help you spend the money to figure out the same thing I just gave you in the 4 stages. Are there any questions out there on the 4 stages and kind of how to apply that in your specific situation?
Hey, Bill, this is Jesse. I have just a couple quick questions kind of related to, well, one is related to, who do you call? Okay, say you've been hacked, right? Like something's happened and you need to deal with the situation. Who should your first call be to? Should it be to law enforcement? Should it be to your IT expert? Or, who do you recommend that first call go to?
So there's a couple really answers that are going to depend back again on you having sat down and looked at how you've constructed your support mechanism. You need to define those things before it's too late. So if you haven't, as a company, a private entity, a one-person's company, if you haven't devised those answers, you need to really sit down. So here's what I would recommend in those conditions. Based on the kind of activity that you are performing, be it credit card numbers, you better be calling the police, the bank, and whomever else you have as a support structure. So if you pay a professional entity to provide you security, you call them. If you have a PCI compliant entity that you deal with, you call them. Deal with the experts, let them help you. look into if you're doing enough capital transactions that you need to have cyber insurance, you need to look into that. But there are so many different things that go there. Bottom line is the business that you're doing business with that you would have a normal reaction with, you call them, you call the bank, and you call the police for that. Now, you may not get much reaction on all of those. So one of the concerns that we should have as citizens in California and across the nation is that cyber crime has limits on it. So the limit that the FBI will prosecute in the cybercrime arena is $1 million. If you've had that much stolen from you in a small business, you're going out of business. You won't even have time. So the things that you really need to do is pre-plan, pre-talk to your local cyber crime enforcement entity at the police department and understand what their limits are. So some police departments have no cyber forensics capability, so their limit is, I can't help you. You need to know what those limits are before you get going. There's a whole series of these questions I'd love to help you fill out if you really have any questions, and you can come back to me. But it's sitting down and really figuring out what's your exposure in this whole process. Jesse, I hope that answers your question.
It did, and just one quick kind of follow-up, because I know that here on the webinar we have folks that work with a lot of microenterprise directly, and I'm sure some of the questions they're going to get is, well, I don't really have that kind of in-house support, and I'm going to need to contract out and have somebody help me on these kind of issues. Can you get just in as much as you can, or just a brief taste of it, as we look to contract out or work with these kind of independent contractors or firms? What's the, how do they know they're getting the right kind of service? What kind of questions should they be getting from those kind of vendors?
Well, again, it really goes back to what you consider to be your crown jewels for doing your business. What kind of transactional basis is your company on? If you are on a cash transaction, if you're on a credit card transaction, if you're in a PCI, all those different factors really weigh into what you want for service. I think the bottom line is you have to figure out what lines of protection you need. We've already mentioned how insecure mailing is. If you have a POS type transaction online, you really want to go with a good one. You pay for what you get in that world, trust me. If you're doing business with a bank, you want to make sure that your bank is doing transactional awareness. In other words, if large money is being transacted electronically, there is some kind of support mechanism for that bank that makes you aware when dollars move at all. So what you want is a heads up call or a movement call. We've seen several incidents in recent where people's complete bank accounts have been emptied and the bank did not call the individual to ensure that they had asked for the electronic transfer. Now, that seems unconscionable, but that's not a requirement of the bank to do. They have you sign a form that says basically if you electronic transact with them, they're going to follow that transaction and not call you back. I would change banks. And those are just, standards and protocols, again, that are associated with how you do business. If you hire a company to do your security portfolio for you, I would say that there's really 3 things you want to look at. Number one, do they take the time to understand what you really need to have done? Do they provide you with a cost-effective structure? In other words, if they come in and they tell you, you've got to rebuild your entire IT network to satisfy the needs necessary, and they're throwing Bible and verse structure at you to do so, you should be very concerned that you're probably overpaying for what you need. And the third thing that's most important is check it yourself. Act as if you're a consumer and test your own system. Act like you're a vendor. Act like you're a buyer. Go in and use your kid's account, your neighbor's account, whatever, and try to transact with your own system. See how hard or easy it really is to do those things with.
Great, and I see we have a question from Rich. Can you repeat what the $1 million figure is for cyber insurance? Is that minimum coverage or deductible?
Yeah, so the whole cyber insurance is based on who authorizes it. My reference to the $1 million was that the FBI doesn't accept a major cybercrime case until it hits the $1 million number. The rest of those cases go into what's called the Cyber Forensics Working Group, which is basically you report your incident into a working group and you may or may not ever hear from that working group. If it hits $1 million, you know that an FBI agent will be contacting you about that cybercrime element. Now, some agencies like local law enforcement have a lower figure that they go with, but that's for the cybercrime prosecution. On the coverage side, that is completely up to the person issuing. We've seen law firms that do coverage. We've seen insurance firms that do coverage. We've seen IT firms that do that. Each of them has a different set of rules and coverage and deductibles for how they do it. And the bottom line of most of these for insurance in the cyber side, what they will require is that you are following a set of rules that they generate. So that basically says if your system, your IT, your transactional system doesn't match their rule set, you have to rebuild your system to match that rule set. But it's one of those things where they don't necessarily tell you it matched until you have an event and they check your system. So it's a really tough thing to do. Lots of companies are requiring that if you're doing a subcontract with another entity, that company has to take out a cyber insurance in the event that they provide something into your supply chain that corrupts, malwares your system. Again, all of those things are absolutely dependent on the transaction at the time. It's kind of a mess. There's no overarching way it gets done. It's kind of all over the place, and you pay for what you get.
Awesome, thank you. Before we move on, thank you, Bill, for the great information already. Before we move on to Darren's section, Heidi, did you want to do a couple of quick polls?
Yeah, and I just want to do a call out to see if there's any other questions for Bill at the moment. You can either type it in while I'm showing the polls, or you can unmute yourself by just clicking on the microphone button. There should be a red slash on your microphone, but you can click that and take it off. So we are going to do a couple of polls here to get an idea of where everybody's at. So you should now be able to see the polls and vote. If this is our first time, so if you can't see the polls.
This is not fair. I can't vote. This is Bill. I was going to put myself in the been there, done that phase.
Right?
Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, great.
Right.
We have one person who voted. Can we have everybody else who's able? I know some of you are on your phone, so you're not able. Voted. I can share the results. Give you guys a couple of minutes to read it. Oh, we haven't been there, done that. I want to talk to you. Guys, a couple more, another 15 seconds to chime in. And great. So thanks for those of you who chimed in. It looks like we at least have a couple people who are at the been there, done that. Here's the results. Maybe at the end, if we have some time, we'll ask you like what's happened. Looks like we're all over the board though. A couple people have been had.
Is it possible to find out? Maybe do these stages, are they relevant to you? Do they make sense? You know, cybersecurity is, in my opinion, is too often made into a deep technical discussion that just makes it worse than it really even started off. This is really an attempt to try to get it down to where you can at least judge where you feel.
Yeah, so there's people who have, you guys who had chimed in, you want to just type something, you can type something into chat.
Well, this is Rich. I'll confess to being oblivious. That's why I'm on this call. I've had one client who was the victim of ransomware and didn't pay and had his everything wiped out on his hard drives or such.
Oh, the ransomware thing. Yeah, that's they hold your computer hostage.
Yeah, Rich. So believe it or not, the backup drives, the capability to go to that into the cloud, even though you may be a small company, is becoming so easy to do. Everybody is afraid of it because they think the cloud is less secure than your own environment. I got news for you. AWS, Amazon Web Services, as an example, spends billions of dollars on security. which I think far outpaces any of what we all spend in a little, in a little individual sense. There's new ways to look at these problems that are really in your control. I think the biggest thing for all these companies and everybody else to understand, you have a lot more control over the whole situation than you know of. And that there are simple answers out there. You just have to really kind of talk to people to find out what they are.
So backing up for ransomware, that sounds like a great tip. Okay, Jesse, you want to continue?
Yeah, let's take it forward. Yeah, so thanks again, Bill. And all I'll say is that for those of you who feel afraid and unsure about this this world of cybersecurity, please know that you're not alone. And I'll tell you that and Sid can attest to this too. That I've worked with a lot of businesses, and you'd be surprised, even with major employers, how they struggle to deal with this issue. The most we can do, and the way we encourage you to do, is ask a lot of questions. Right? Don't be afraid to raise your hand and say, I could really use some help with what I'm dealing with, because know that you are not the first to ever have experienced whatever particular situation you're in. But let's move on and bring in Darren now. And Darren's going to provide a little bit different perspective. You're really talking about essentially the landscape of technology and some of the convergence that's happening around different technology and use of that technology and how it impacts you as a small business and the constituents you serve, and how it all really ties into kind of the overall state of cyber risk. So let me turn over to Darren, and Darren, just let me know when you need me to advance the slide.
Yeah, go ahead and advance the first slide. I'll just give a quick background on myself. My name is Darren Anderson. I'm a cybersecurity, privacy, Internet of Things, and smart cities expert. I've been in the practice for just over 15 years. I've worked with a number of cybersecurity companies. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've worked with 3 startup companies that have exited in the cybersecurity and technology space, including ESET, Norman Shark. I currently found and fund Next Robotics, which is a Internet of Things and smart cities application. We build a 4-wheel drive security vehicle that does physical and digital security on a site. My background is as a community builder and organizer, a practitioner as a consultant, and sometimes area of last resort or post-attack. We've worked on a lot of major breaches over the years and have been very early in this space and helping to organize San Diego as part of the bigger global community of cybersecurity experts, because it's definitely a team sport when it comes to cybersecurity. And I want you to hold that as a context that for your own business, that it is a team sport. And that starts with you as a leader, adopting and putting your arms around the fact that while it's not the only risk you face in your small business, it's one that should be paid attention to it. On the scale of bad things that can happen, you're unlikely to have a major catastrophic issue, like as described by ransomware, but it is happening. And I can tell you, as some of the both guests and speakers on the call have already mentioned, it can happen to you, but it probably won't. And I want to leave you with a few tips today to help you understand how to keep yourself as protected as possible. Here we're not talking about an absolute. We're always striving for half the distance to the wall. And you can have a lot of impact on your ability to get faster and closer to the wall, and your willingness to do the few extra steps that it takes to keep yourself digitally and physically secure, and also to create a context of security culture in your business without driving yourself out of business. Because of course, perfect cybersecurity and physical security is, hiding under your bed all day. It's detaching your computer from the internet, taking your keyboard off. I can guarantee you perfect security. I can't suggest that your business will necessarily be successful if you close in that way. So I'm here to help steer a middle course and to provide you with some tips and tricks about how to do that. I wanted to just share a little bit about the broader context of smart cities and its impact on cybersecurity. When I started in this business, probably about the same time that Bill did, 10 or so years ago, we were protecting servers, we were protecting laptops. What came next was the smartphones and all the devices that people were bringing to the office, and turns out those had some vulnerabilities that needed to be locked down and secure as well. There was an era of really locking down those cell phones that took place about 4 or 5 years ago. Now there's a whole host of new things that are coming onto the network. So the things that I call the livables, wearables, and drivables, the Internet of Things, which for me is kind of smart, is IoT 2.0 or Internet of Things 2.0 is the smart city. And progressively, we're all living in cities that are becoming smarter, more digitally connected, and more vulnerable in some dimension. Always technology at its core is seeking to enhance productivity. So that's the good side of it, is if you can embrace and leverage the technologies that come down the chute and disseminate those within your workplace, you have the ability to leverage some fantastic technologies. I think no time in human history and in small business history have there been so many things available to us in the open source domain, in the ability for us to start up our businesses fairly inexpensively and even run those inexpensively. Of course, with that comes some level of risk, some level of precaution that it makes sense for us to take on. So a little bit about smart cities and why it's germane to this discussion. As I mentioned, so many things that used to not be online are being put online now. It's the livables, drivables, and wearables that progressively are entering into your life. I talk about it as like a poppy field where the poppies are sprouting up around you. No one declares that the city is a smart city. It just sort of happens over time as more technologies come to the table, are implemented by cities, commercial businesses, small businesses, and us as consumers at home, bringing our smart TVs, our vehicles, our applications like Slack that we use at work, all these things which promote better and more transparent and easy education, but also have with them some level of risk. This is a big impact that we'll see over the next 5 to 10 years. Smart city and the associated cybersecurity market with that is a $2 trillion market with a lot of positive growth, growing at over the 10 to 12% rate. So this is an area that's hot. These devices are being leveraged, more and more every day. And there's a near $10 trillion impact growing to $20 million again over the next 5 to 10 years. Some of you may have heard that the expectation is for up to 50 billion devices to be connected by the year 2020, which is, so it turns out, not that far away. We're talking about next year. We're sort of, by most people's account, in the 30 to 35 billion range now for new devices being put on. So there's more and more things that are being added. A lot of this, of course, is cost driven, with companies seeing cost reduction in their human resources, billing, operational, and other systems sort of in the 20 to 25% range, which is relevant, right? You get sort of over that magic 20, 25% range people care about. That's enough cost to be significant. What most of the pundits have not hit very well is the amount of data storage, which has actually exceeded most expectations and predictions. So you have a lot more that's come online and being hosted and saved than was even expected. So you have in some ways, like sort of a data shortage that we're all working through. Sort of, if you look at the smart home as a kind of small cosmos of what's going on, you can see some of the types of devices that we're talking about, which is the things that are inside of our homes, our vehicles, and our workplace, the applications that we use to control those, and the kind of significant impact that has on us in trying to manage our world in a secure, yet more cost-effective and productive manner. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I mentioned that to me, the wearables, livables, and drivables, it's this idea of like the poppy fields that are popping up all around us. And my suggestion to you, and I want to leave you with $3,000 to $5,000 tips, so you can walk away with some real value from today's meeting and discussion, is that while not something to fear, something to be aware of, the additional security concerns that surround these devices, and thinking in the context that things that have been traditional and non-connected are now connected, and just to extend your thinking about security and good digital practice as a way to keep yourself more protected in this new domain. So a couple of tips that I'll share. Cyber hygiene, which just means basic password management, making sure your employees are using good password management, what we call in the business kind of cyber hygiene. And we all know the smell test for human hygiene. Cyber is the same way. You're looking for the smell test to know, does this feel right? When I get that email that that was alluded to as a potential spam, does it make sense that this person would communicate with you in this way? More things are sort of broken open from a cyber perspective by breaking someone's psychology and then breaking their actual technology. It turns out that the human is the weakest link in it. So know that the bad guys know that you're the weak link, and they're going to try to prey on that. And you need to, in some ways, think like them. And so when you see things that seem suspicious, you've got to put it to the smell test. You've got to take that extra step to maybe forward that email or take a screenshot better of that email, because sometimes there's sort of digital bad stuff in the email that you're forwarding. But you can take a screenshot and says, is this you, or is this the way that we're communicating around this issue? So many times it's the push the button because I'm trying to save time that really harms us. So that's sort of one of my $1,000 tips. The second is just what I call tighten up. It's keeping a situational awareness of the domains in which you have digital vulnerability. It can or cannot be your vehicle because we have hacked smart cars, but it's more likely to be things that control your money. So where you want to be on high alert is anything around your banking system, any of your accounts. Normally, businesses like PayPal, banks, and other organizations do not ask you to update anything online. And understand that when someone is asking you as a small business person to provide additional information, it's quite likely that unless you've had a voice-to-voice conversation with the person on the other end, that it's somebody fishing for you to add and give credentials. If you happen to make that mistake and send credentials, my third $1,000 tip would be go in, make the change, and manage your passwords very carefully. You should have a kind of regular, if you don't use a password locker, which some of those have been hacked as well, but in general, I support the use of password lockers, though I have to be honest and say I don't use them myself. I find for my lifestyle that I keep a kind of a mental algorithm of how I get into the over 85 accounts that I use as a small business person. And I have everything in a secret, secure digital space. I have an algorithm that I use to set my passwords according to a way that I can remember it. Because to me, the pain of the non-productivity is even harder to deal with than the possibility of being hacked. I will tell you as a disclaimer that I had my identity, my wife and I both had our identities stolen about 4 or 5 years ago. I've, like probably all of you, had multiple personal and corporate credit cards that have been compromised. And probably on average, I find I have a couple of different corporate cards, for example, because I got a couple different businesses, that each of those gets compromised on average about once a year. So I think that's probably in kind of a standard range of things. So, when it comes to hacking your smart business, understand that it's largely a psychological game. If someone wants to break into your network, into your personal computers, and they're smart enough with enough resources, they will do it. And that is something that you just have to accept. And it's like any other thing, like walking down the street in Paris on a dark night late, you're taking a certain risk, and you just have to choose whether you're willing to take that risk or not. So use, again, the smell test, use, again, your common sense, take that extra moment to forward answer back, a screenshot, ask about it. Anytime there's a sizable amount of money that's on a wire or anything like that, it's just best to pick up the phone, talk to your personal banker who's probably on top of it, because they're more paranoid than you about, typically, and I know that there was some exceptions presented, but if you have a good personal bank and a good personal banker, they're typically on top of this stuff because they don't want to make mistakes for themselves or you or the bank. Next slide, please.
Hey, Darren, this is Bill. If you don't mind, I think one of the things that Darren's mentioning, and I think it's something that we can just add in here real quick, it's really about that consumer approach to doing things. Well, we go to a bank, we try to get the best rate at the bank, but there's the opportunity really for businesses to interview the bank about how they behave and how they react to an event and how they protect you. Same with credit cards. How do they protect you? And these are things that you can put in your portfolio that don't cost you a dime.
Absolutely. And I would definitely second and support that and say that, and I'll just tell you the two banks I use. I'm not saying that you should use them or not, but I'm giving you examples. I use First Republic Bank for a number of my accounts. I have like 4 accounts with them. And I have sort of one contact banker, and he and I talk anytime there's any large kind of sums of monies moving around. Like he'll call me. There's just kind of that personal relationship. There definitely is a difference between a good business bank and a more retail consumer oriented bank like a Wells Fargo and Bank of America. I also started with a small bank, one of the few banking startups in anywhere in the country, but in San Diego, called Endeavor. And with them, it's a great bank. I know kind of the founders of that bank. It's highly integrity, but they are even tighter. And sometimes, you know, again, it's stressful to me when I'm trying to get things done that they're so tight because they're a new bank. They're as highly regulated as you could be, with lots of people kind of looking over their shoulder, making sure that nothing's going wrong. But there is definitely a difference between banking relationships. And these, I think, banks that are serving small business people definitely understand that, you know, it's a high value for them to be on top of this on your behalf. So they've got, you know, good fraud detection departments and systems, a lot of times a risk manager that's sitting in the office that is making those real-time decisions, which in my mind works really well. So my 5th, 6th, and 7th tips of the session is update your software regularly. Most of it's being done automatically, so you don't even have to worry about it, but just make sure that your laptops, desktops, you should have an admin or your computer guy that's doing regular updates. Encourage him or her to make those updates so that's going to solve many of the password issues. A lot of this is the tale of you, the bear, and the person that's, you know, the 2 people that are running away, which is you and someone else. If you're a harder target, if you're further down the path, then, you know, they're going to try to crack into the weakest door and try to go in through the window that is wide open, because cyber criminals are generally pretty smart, but they're also generally lazy. And again, their game usually is to brute force many potential areas of vulnerability opportunity with the hopes that they can climb in one door or window. Whereas we as cybersecurity experts and or small business people are trying to defend all those things. So it's a real mismatch. Again, if you're unlucky enough to, you know, get on somebody's radar, you're going to have issues. It's going to be hard to avoid. What you definitely want to be careful about is the ransomware. Can't emphasize strongly enough. It is a game changer, game ender for some. I've seen it where it's had massive catastrophic impacts. The ability to lock up all of your customer data, your financial data. You just need to make sure that you have a copy of that that's set up periodically, at least within a month or 2 months, or, you know, even a year. But I think, you know, sort of doing proper backups, you know, annually is not enough. You've got to be thinking about it, you know, if not weekly, certainly monthly, because you can recover from that. It's hard to recover from a year of old data. There is definitely the skill sets out there to lock these accounts down so you can't get into them. And we've seen, in my practice as a cybersecurity expert, we've seen cities, nonprofits, commercial companies pay ransoms because it is cheaper. And the criminals, of course, know this. There's a, you know, deep web, which or dark web, that some of you have probably heard about, where there's sort of a trading game between criminals. They know that they don't want to make the price so expensive that you won't pay it, because they prefer you pay it and then they can move on. They're trying to have a certain integrity among thieves so that you know that if you pay them the money, they'll release your data. Generally speaking, and I would say this is 9 times out of 10, your data is going to get recirculated to a Keiretsu partner of the bad guy, who's going to come back and reattack you, probably from another vector at some point in the future. So these guys have like an internal trading system of accounts that they've hacked, and they circulate and recycle them. So on the one hand, you think, well, I paid these guys, I'll never see them again. But then lo and behold, another vector attacker shows up, and they may have the keys to how to break you open and extort more money. So, you know, keeping strong passwords. Yep.
Hey, just and we're going to need to have some time for Sid's section. Any kind of final advice or thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple more quick tips. Use multi-factor authentication. If you have to carry a token or get a phone token, that's a great way to go. use device encryption, especially for your large sensitive computers, and understand that there's a lot of intelligence coming down. Some of that is making its way into cybersecurity, so you won't always have to worry about these problems top of mind. What we're seeing as a general term, and I'll end here, is that we're making a return to trusted communities, that one-on-one relationships, whether it's with your banker, with somebody that's sort of in your network, they're going to help you navigate through this. And I'm a small business person as well, so I have very direct experience on all sides with this. So if you have any questions or comments, be happy to answer any of that now.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. And I know, and as I mentioned at the top, I know there's a lot of different aspects related to cybersecurity. And all we're really doing right now is really kind of touching upon a lot of different subjects. And definitely, if you have the questions you like the panelists to answer directly or like to follow up, we'll share contact information so you can do that direct and kind of interact with them. But with the time we have left, let's turn over to Sid. And, Sid, what I wanted to do is really have you talk about just some of the few tools and resources that are out there. For a lot of folks, it's just really hard to navigate and figure out where do you go for support and some guidance. And and I thought you maybe could touch upon some of those resources that are out there. So I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jesse. I am just want to make sure I keep my remarks brief since we're really short on time because we've had such great information already shared. I think that, yes, from Heidi just sent out a note that said all the slides will be shared with everybody. And I can tell you very quickly that the resources that I've laid out here for you on this one slide are all easily found online on Google to identify and pull out these different guides and resources. But just really quickly, Cascade, which stands for the California Advanced Supply Chain Analysis and Diversification Effort. It's a mouthful, right? So it's an initiative that was funded by the Department of Defense, really to bolster California's defense supply chain cybersecurity resilience, innovation capacity, and diversification strategy. So a lot is going into this initiative. And one project is just a labor market analysis and skills gap analysis. Through the initiative, 385 businesses were surveyed to collect data for 9 of the most common cybersecurity occupations. And here's what you'll see is what the survey results found. Like we have a lack of qualified candidates in general, lack of relevant work experience, and lack of required technology. Like bar none, that is an alarm bell given the number of current and expected shortages in the next few years to come. The next 3 really are just resources and guides. I know there's a few folks on the call who are micro enterprises and others that support micro enterprises. I encourage you to take a look at them because they are easy to digest. The Workforce Toolkit is actually a program developed by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And the Cybersecurity My Small Business is a program of the U.S. Department of Commerce. So there's been a ton of vetting that's gone into these different resources, and they are easy to digest and for you to be able to share and hopefully use kind of like as quick guides. But I think really what's important is the quick guides are there as a resource, but I'd certainly turn it over to experts like Darren and Bill who can really provide a deeper level kind of insight for you as you get deep into this work. And just one of the things, since we are really running out of time, I just want to turn over quickly. Jesse mentioned at the top of this that when he and I were at GoBiz, we work closely with Bill and Cal Poly on a cybersecurity challenge. I know we Bill likes to call it, and I've heard him say it a few times, they're training the next generation of white hat cyber professionals. Just going back to that Cascade survey where we have employers who have challenges with the talent pool, and we have significant shortages. Cal Poly has taken a statewide lead on trying to identify and build an infrastructure for high school students and now middle school students to be cyber kind of enthusiasts, if you will, and cybersecurity enthusiasts. So, Bill, I'd like to turn it over to you just because the program is going to be coming up and thought you might want to share a little bit about it.
Sure. Just real quick, there's numerous programs around the state of California. what's really interesting here, there is more than enough work to go around. If every California State University system and UC had a program to help develop workforce, there still wouldn't be enough output to satisfy the demands of the state. So we're like the kid that, you know, one university is better than the other, but really we need them all to be successful. What we've done is we've worked from a real basic problem. If I talk about lawyers or doctors or sports or other athletes, it's real simple to find someone that a young person can identify with and look up to. But if I start talking about cybersecurity, who do they have to look up to? Who's out there that is, you know, the white hat extraordinaire that you can refer to off the tip of your tongue, that a student in middle school can say, yeah, I want to be like that person. Well, that person doesn't really exist because this whole business is built around being behind the scenes. And so what we're trying to do is to get students to be exposed at a younger age to what really goes on in this environment of forensics analysis and cybersecurity, and see if we can't get them motivated in thinking about the good guy, the white hat side of being in cybersecurity, and really making it kind of a gamification. So we basically do, and we'll be doing 21 through 23 June at Cal Poly. We've invited 32 high schools from across the state of California. So the 16 regional champions, and then 16 lower division, which is mostly middle schools, to come and compete on a cyber forensics event based on a hospital that has had malware introduced into the hospital systems. You would be surprised how knowledgeable and how smart these middle school and high school students are on understanding the technology, the way to solve it. And what we do that's a little different in our event is we actually have a process where forensics, reverse engineering, and really critical thinking. So basically, we give them a scenario that has live sets and live performers in the set, and then they have to figure out the whodunit, like electronic clue, and then provide their answers to a panel of real, true cyber experts. And what's really nice is the experts get to then interact with the students, and we have forums by which they interact. They get a winner, the winner gets a trophy, and they get recognized at the state capitol. But it's really developing earlier on that next generation problem solver, to where some of these high school kids may be solving your problems that you have in your small business. It's absolutely amazing to watch, and it's something I would recommend. If you ever get a chance, come out and take a look at it. Thank you very much, Sid, for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sid. And, you know, just a few key takeaways. I know we're at time here, and definitely if you have additional questions, like to email us. You know, I'm sure the panel will be happy to respond. And thank you to our panel for your time today. But, you know, just a few kind of key takeaways. You know, really what I you know, took away the most from the presentation is things like, you know, situational awareness. You know, part of emergency preparedness, disaster preparedness is understanding, you know, what are the factors within your own business that you need to look at and understand in order to assess the risk that's there for you. Understanding that cybersecurity is a team sport, and that you need to, you know, really connect with your local law enforcement and local experts to really help you understand, you know, what is the risk to your business, and don't be afraid to make those relationships, so that should you encounter a situation that you need to deal with, you know who to connect to, and just know that there's resources out there and partners willing to help. You know, folks like Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo that's trying to train and educate the next cyber warrior. Folks like Darren, who's on the leading edge at the state, really trying to drive conversation around economic development and the impact of cyber risk upon small businesses. And of course, organizations like CAMEO, which has a vested interest in making sure that microenterprises around the state are thriving and secure and adding jobs. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Heidi to close this out.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. Thanks, gentlemen. That was actually really, I got some really good tips, and I'll add to Jesse's tips a couple, I think, easy takeaways that you can kind of institute right now in your organizations. Point of sale, you get what you pay for. If you're online, you get what you pay for. I thought that was really good for our micro businesses, because, you know, a lot of our small businesses are going to go for the cheapest. Well, maybe it's not going to be cheap in the end. And on the flip side of that, if you're going to a security firm and they're trying to charge you an arm and a leg, that should be a red flag for you. So sort of you get what you pay for, right? in two different ways. And the other thing is backup. Who here has backed up their personal computer recently? I know I haven't. I know I'm going to go do that this weekend. So I just wanted to remind you of 2 things that are going on in CAMEO right now. We're doing a member survey. You can be entered into a drawing for a basket provided to us by El Pajaro's Kitchen Incubator. And we have our Advocacy Day on June 4th. There's a link to register if you haven't already. I think a bunch of you might already be on there. And then I just want to again thank our guests. To me, I know cybersecurity is kind of like eating your broccoli. And I always have this metaphor of eating your broccoli and putting a little cheese on it so that people eat it. I definitely think you guys gave the secret sauce, so thank you. And we'll be posting this on our website as well, so you can listen to it again, share it with your colleagues, share it with staff, as well as sending out the PowerPoint and some notes. So yes, we will, Rich, we will definitely give the contact information for the panelists. So with that, I am going to end the recording and end the webinar. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.